Birds scattered suddenly, their warning cries echoing in the distance. The sound of branches snapping grew louder, closer. Then came the thunderous crash, and everything turned to chaos. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we dive into today's stories, I'd like to ask for your support by subscribing to the channel. Your subscription is very important to us, so please subscribe to stay updated with future stories. Also, leave a comment letting me know which city in the world you're watching from. Now, let's get into the first attack. The sun was barely cresting the horizon, casting a soft golden light across the rugged landscape of Yellowstone National Park. The air was crisp with the scent of pine, and the only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves as the wind whispered through the trees. My boots crunched on the gravel trail as I hiked beside the river, the water rushing over stones, its roar distant but soothing. This was the calm before everything changed. I could feel it, deep down. Something was off. I shifted my backpack and adjusted my hat. I was trying to take in the beauty of the place, but a gnawing sense of unease kept tugging at the back of my mind. It wasn't the park itself, nor the wilderness that had always fascinated me. It was just that today felt different. Maybe it was the isolation. It was early morning, and I hadn't passed another soul on the trail in over an hour. I was used to hiking alone, had been doing it for years, but this morning, something seemed wrong. I stopped for a moment, letting the cool air fill my lungs. The park was quiet, almost too quiet. The birds weren't singing. The wind wasn't whistling through the trees the way it usually did. I glanced around the dense forest, scanning the shadows, half expecting to see something moving just out of sight. I brushed it off as paranoia. I had been a firefighter in Billings for nearly 5 years, seen plenty of dangerous situations. But this was different. The wilderness was always dangerous, and maybe I was just trying to convince myself I was being cautious for good reason. "Get a grip, Chris," I muttered to myself as I pushed forward. The sound of the river was a welcome distraction. I focused on the path ahead, listening to the rhythm of my footsteps, the quiet tap of my walking stick against the earth. The trail curved slightly to the left, following the bend of the river, where the trees grew thick and dense. As I neared a particularly steep section of the trail, I took a swig from my water bottle, the cold liquid easing my dry throat. There was no sign of wildlife, no tracks in the soft mud by the water's edge. I felt my tension ease, thinking that maybe I was just overreacting. But then I heard it. A twig snapped, loud and sharp, too deliberate to be a gust of wind. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I froze mid-step, my breath catching in my throat. My body was tense, my heart already pounding in my chest. It was too early for other hikers, too early for anything to be out here except perhaps something bigger. I looked around, scanning the trees, the underbrush. Nothing, just shadows and the tangled branches of the forest. Could have been a deer, I told myself, or a stray elk. It was probably fine, but the nagging feeling wouldn't leave. I gripped my walking stick tighter, eyes darting, trying to remain calm. The woods were alive with hidden creatures. I knew that, yet the unease lingered. Another sound, closer this time, a low, guttural growl muffled by the dense trees. My stomach dropped like a stone, and my pulse quickened. That wasn't a deer. No, that was something much bigger. My instincts kicked in, and I slowly began to backtrack, my feet light on the earth, trying to stay as quiet as possible. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but I had learned long ago that running from a predator was the last thing you should do. I moved toward the tree line, my eyes fixed on the path behind me, my heart hammering in my chest. But then I saw it. A massive shape moved through the trees, barely visible between the thick underbrush. At first, I thought it might be an elk or perhaps a moose, but there was something about the silhouette, the way it moved, that made my blood run cold. The way it stood, with its massive shoulders and lumbering gait. It wasn't an animal I'd want to cross paths with, even on my best day. A black bear? No, this was too big. The silhouette was brown, far too bulky to be anything but a grizzly. My legs went weak, and a sharp, cold sweat broke out across my skin. Grizzlies were rare in this part of the park, but they were around. I knew the dangers, the statistics, especially with a bear that large. My mouth went dry as my instincts told me to stay perfectly still, not to make a sound. The bear paused, its head lifting slowly, as if it were sniffing the air. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure it could hear it. The massive creature's eyes seemed to pierce through the foliage, directly at me. I could feel its gaze, cold and calculating, weighing whether I was a threat or prey. I slowly reached for my bear spray, fingers fumbling for the canister strapped to my belt. My heart was racing, and I could barely hear the rushing of the river over the pounding in my ears. The bear's growl grew louder, a low, throaty sound that vibrated through my bones. Just as I started to unscrew the safety cap, the bear's massive head dipped down, and I realized it wasn't just watching me. It was preparing to charge. My entire body tensed, and the world seemed to slow. Everything I had read about bear encounters flashed through my mind. Stand tall, make yourself appear larger, talk to it, but don't scream. Make yourself an uncomfortable presence. But all of that seemed useless in the face of a creature that could easily rip me apart with a swipe of its claws. I swallowed hard, my breath shallow. I needed to make a decision, and fast. I slowly, very slowly, turned my body to the side, moving away from the bear while keeping my eyes on it. I didn't dare run. I didn't want to provoke it, but I knew I couldn't stay here much longer. The bear was still growling, but now it was circling. I could feel its weight in the air, its presence suffocating. Another rustle in the trees, a quick movement, and the bear lunged. It was like the entire forest exploded into motion. The earth shook as the bear closed the distance between us in a fraction of a second. Its claws flashing, its massive body hurtling toward me. I didn't have time to react. The bear knocked me to the ground with terrifying force. My breath whooshed out of me as I hit the dirt, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. It was a blur of fur and teeth and pain. I felt its claws scrape across my chest, just above my ribs. And then its teeth. Its jaws clamped around my shoulder, biting deep into the muscle. And I screamed, a primal, raw sound that was swallowed by the bear's growl. Pain shot through me like electricity, and I could feel blood pouring from the wound, the warmth soaking through my shirt. I fought back instinctively, thrashing, trying to push the bear off me, but it was too strong. I could feel its weight bearing down, and I couldn't breeze through the pain. And then, as suddenly as it had happened, the bear pulled back. It gave me a final warning growl, like a low rumble from the earth itself. My chest heaved as I struggled to get air into my lungs. Blood pooled beneath me, and the world swam before my eyes. The bear, seemingly satisfied that I wasn't a threat, backed off, slowly retreating into the trees. Its eyes lingered on me for a moment, calculating, and then it turned, its massive form melting into the forest. I lay there, gasping, my heart still racing, every nerve screaming. I had survived. For now, the bear was gone, but it might as well have left a piece of me behind. I lay there on the trail, my breath ragged, my chest rising and falling in shallow gasps. The pain in my shoulder was a constant, throbbing reminder of how close I had come to being shredded by those massive jaws. I didn't know how long I had been lying there, but it felt like hours, though in reality, it had only been minutes. I tried to sit up, but my vision swam as the world around me tilted. The forest was eerily quiet now, the rushing of the river the only sound filling the air. I could hear birds in the distance, maybe a crow or a hawk, but they felt like background noise. My focus was entirely on the ache in my shoulder, the slick wetness that I could feel beneath my fingers. I looked down and saw dark, crimson-red stains seeping through my shirt, pulling beneath me in the dirt. Shit. The words barely escaped my throat, weak and hoarse. My mouth felt dry as sandpaper, and every time I tried to take a deep breath, my shoulders screamed in protest. The pain was intense, but my mind kept drifting back to the bear. I couldn't shake the image of its eyes, the cold, calculating way it had watched me. Like it was sizing me up. What had made it back off? Was it full from something else? Or was it just toying with me, waiting for the right moment to finish the job? I forced myself to my feet, stumbling slightly as dizziness pulled at my senses. The ground seemed to sway beneath me. I had to get out of here. The bear could return, or it might still be watching me from the trees, waiting to see if I was vulnerable. I took a few slow, painful steps, testing my weight. My legs were shaky, and my chest felt tight, but I couldn't stay here. Not when I knew how close I had come to death. As I moved, my fingers fumbled for my phone. Maybe I could call for help. Maybe someone would hear me. Maybe a ranger or another hiker would be nearby. The screen lit up as I pulled it out, and for a brief, hopeful moment, I thought I might be able to dial 911. But no, there was no service. Just one bar, no none. I cursed under my breath. It didn't make sense. I was only a couple of miles from the trailhead. The ranger station wasn't far from there. How could there be no service? Was I really that deep in the woods? I tried again, moving slowly toward the trail, hoping that if I made it to a clearing, maybe the signal would return. But nothing. My phone remained useless, a lifeline I couldn't reach. I turned and took a few more steps, my shoulder burning with each movement. The world around me felt distorted, as if I were moving through a dream. The trail seemed to stretch on forever, the distance between me and safety growing longer with every step. Then I heard it again, a rustle in the trees. Too loud, too deliberate. My heart skipped a beat. There was no mistaking that sound. Something was moving, something big. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Was it the bear? Or was it something else? I had no way of knowing. I could only pray that whatever it was didn't decide to follow me. I tried to keep calm, moving off the path and into the underbrush, hoping to blend in with the forest. I crouched down, my back pressed against the rough bark of a nearby tree. The pain in my shoulder was almost unbearable, but I gritted my teeth and focused on the sounds ahead of me. The rustling stopped, but I could hear something shifting nearby. Footsteps, heavy ones, though not as heavy as the bear's. Then the snap of a branch. My blood ran cold. I clenched my fists, praying it wasn't the bear. No way. The beast couldn't be back so quickly. It was probably just another hiker, right? Maybe someone had heard the bear's growl and was coming to check things out. Or maybe it was a ranger, come to make sure everything was okay. "Hello," I called out, my voice cracking from the strain of pain and fear. For a moment there was silence. Then I heard the voice. Male, gruff and slightly out of breath. "Hey, are you okay?" I exhaled sharply. Relief flooded me, though the fear still churned in my stomach. I pushed myself from the tree and stood, not quite able to keep my balance. I've been attacked. A bear. A grizzly. My voice was weak, but the words spilled out, desperate for any help. Then, it just attacked me. "I need help." A man stepped into view, his face sunburned and weathered, his clothes practical and worn. He was carrying a heavy-looking pack, hiking boots, and a walking stick. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Holy hell," he muttered, his eyes flicking to the blood soaking through my shirt. "You've been mauled." I need to get back to the trailhead," I said, my voice trembling. Can you help me?" The man took a few steps forward, looking over me with a mixture of concern and confusion. He paused, scanning the trees around us before giving me a grim nod. "I can help you," he said, his voice steady but cautious. "But we need to move fast. You don't want to be out here alone with that thing." He gestured toward the path behind me. "Come on, we'll head back to the parking lot. I've got a radio. We can get some help there. You're gonna be okay." I nodded weakly, doing my best to keep up with him as we began to move down the trail. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and the reality of the situation began to set in. My shoulder throbbed with every step, and my legs felt like lead. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not after everything. The man kept a steady pace, glancing back at me every few moments as I struggled to stay upright. "You said it was a grizzly?" he asked, his tone tight with worry. "Yeah," I rasped. "A big one. I don't know what set it off, but it attacked me. It knocked me down, hit my shoulder. I don't know what stopped it." "You got lucky," he said, shaking his head. "Grizzlies don't usually just back off unless they're satisfied or scared off. You're lucky it didn't finish the job." I didn't respond, too focused on putting one foot in front of the other. My mind kept replaying the bear's eyes, that cold, predatory stare. Every time I blinked, I could still feel its claws, its teeth. My body shuddered involuntarily, and I forced myself to focus on the sound of the man's footsteps ahead of me. We walked for what felt like hours. The trailhead felt so far away, and every minute dragged on like a lifetime. My head was spinning, but the sight of the parking lot in the distance gave me hope. I didn't know if I could make it there on my own, but the man, who had yet to introduce himself, was there, a steady presence guiding me through the worst pain I had ever felt. When we finally reached the parking lot, I collapsed onto the nearest bench. I couldn't stand any longer. My legs buckled beneath me, and my vision blurred again. The man immediately pulled out his radio, speaking urgently into it, but my mind was a fog. My body was shutting down. I could feel my heartbeat slowing, my thoughts becoming disjointed. "Help is on the way," he said. "You're gonna be okay." I wanted to believe him, but all I could think about was the bear, and the feeling of its weight on top of me. I woke up to the sterile scent of antiseptic, the faint beeping of machines, and the uncomfortable sensation of hospital sheets clinging to my skin. My body ached in ways I couldn't even begin to describe, but there was something else too, something cold and unfamiliar in my bones. "Dear," I realized with a start that it wasn't just the pain that kept me from breathing easily. It was the memory of what had happened. The grizzly's claws, its jaws tearing into my flesh. It felt like a nightmare, but I knew it wasn't. A soft, steady murmur of voices drifted into my foggy mind, pulling me fully awake. I blinked a few times, trying to make sense of my surroundings. The bright fluorescent lights above, the white walls, the soft hum of machines. It was all so clinical, so detached from the wild forest I'd been in just hours ago. "Hey, Chris, you're awake," came a voice. It was familiar but distant. I turned my head slowly, squinting to make out the figure by my bedside. It was a nurse, a woman with dark hair pulled into a bun and soft, kind eyes. I opened my mouth, but my throat was dry, raw, and my voice came out as little more than a hoarse rasp. "Where am I?" "You're in the hospital, honey. We've been waiting for you to wake up." She smiled gently, brushing a lock of hair from my forehead. "You were pretty out of it for a while there. How are you feeling? Can you move your arm?" I glanced down at my left shoulder, wincing as I shifted slightly. The bandages were thick and layered, and I could feel the swelling beneath them. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would, at least not yet, but the ache was constant, and dull thrum, like the pulse of a bruise that never went away. I don't know. My shoulder. I trailed off, trying to piece together what had happened. The last thing I remembered clearly was the bear, those terrible moments of being slammed to the ground, its teeth sinking into my flesh. The nurse nodded sympathetically. "You've got a deep wound there. We had to do a couple of stitches, but it looks like you're going to be okay. A bit of a miracle, really. You're lucky to be alive." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting her words wash over me. "The bear?" I whispered, feeling the panic rise again. It just attacked me. Then it left." The nurse gave me a soft look, her face clouded with concern. "Yeah, we've heard the stories about bears acting unpredictably. You're not the first to have a close call in this park, but you're one of the luckier ones." She paused, as if weighing her words carefully. "The park rangers found your pack along the trail. They called it in, and someone was able to get to you before it was too late. Well, you're going to need some rest. I swallowed hard, trying to push the panic back down. I couldn't think about the bear. Not Nell. Not with everything I had just been through. I glanced toward the window, but the bright daylight outside only reminded me of how far I still was from the park, from the river, from the attack. Did anyone else get hurt? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It felt important to know, even though I already had a sinking feeling that the answer would be no. No, just you, the nurse replied gently. We've had other hikers who were nearby, but no one else was involved. You were lucky, Chris. I nodded slowly, my mind spinning. What happened with the bear? I mean, did anyone find it? I had to ask. I didn't even know why. Maybe I just needed something to feel real. Something that could confirm what had happened to me wasn't just some nightmare. She shook her head, her expression growing more serious. No sign of it. We've got a few teams in the area searching, but no reports. It's like it just disappeared. But you're the second attack this week, so they're taking it seriously. I blinked. Second attack? My stomach twisted at the thought. I wasn't the only one. The idea of another person going through what I had, of another person being mauled by that same bear, made me sick. It felt wrong, somehow like a part of me was still out there in those woods, in that same danger. You said it was a grizzly. The nurse hesitated. Are you sure about that? I swallowed, trying to clear the fog in my head. Yeah, I'm sure. It was massive. I've seen black bears before, but this one, it was huge. Big claws, a broad head. It was a grizzly. The words came out with a cold finality that made my chest tighten. It was a fact. I had been attacked by a grizzly bear, and nothing would change that. She didn't reply at first. Instead, she adjusted the 4-line in my arm and made a few notes on a chart by the bedside. Finally, she spoke again, her voice soft but measured. You might want to be careful about talking to people outside of the hospital, Chris. You know how things go when an incident like this happens. Some people get it, others, they don't always understand. What do you mean? I asked, my brows furrowing. She hesitated again. You're going to need a police report, a statement from the rangers. I'm not saying they won't take it seriously, but we both know the official line on bear attacks. It's hard to prove, especially if there's no clear sign of the animal afterward. A lot of the time, people are told to be more careful, or, just avoid going off the trail in bear country. I blinked, feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. So you think they'll just ignore it? I almost died. She placed a hand on my arm, her touch calm but firm. I didn't say they'll ignore it, Chris, but sometimes it's hard to get the authorities to act without evidence. They're probably going to tell you it's a freak accident, or they'll tell you to stay away from that area in the future. It's standard protocol in places like Yellowstone. They'll take down your statement, sure, but you might not get the help you expect. A cold chill washed over me. The realization settled like a stone in my gut. What if I couldn't prove what happened? What if it was just my word against the wilderness? The bear had left no tracks, no clear sign of its presence beyond the wounds on my body. The rangers would likely find nothing, just an empty trail, a discarded backpack, and a guy with blood on his shirt. That's insane, I muttered. So, no one's going to help me? Not really. She met my eyes, her gaze steady. I'm not saying that, but it won't be easy, Chris. Bear attacks happen, but they don't always make the news. You're lucky you survived, and you're lucky you got out alive. But you'll need to be prepared for the long haul with the paperwork. The doctors will take care of you. But she trailed off, and I nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. I was a statistic now, just another close call in the endless list of bear encounters. Even if I survived, no one would really understand the terror of what had happened. To bear, the pain, the way it felt like it was all over in an instant, and no one would truly know how close I had come to dying out there. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. It didn't matter, I told myself. I was alive, but the memory of the attack, of the bear's eyes, of the blood, of the claws sinking into my flesh, would never leave me, and that was something I could never explain to anyone. The days after I left the hospital were a blur of medical appointments, painkillers, and disjointed thoughts. I tried to move through life like everything was normal, but nothing felt normal. My shoulder ached with every movement, and the mental scars were just as raw as the physical ones. The bear attack had become a part of me, something I couldn't escape no matter how much I tried to distract myself. It had been 4 days since the incident, and I was back in Billings, trying to return to my routine. The bruises were fading, the stitches in my shoulder were healing, but the memories were still sharp. The look in the bear's eyes, its growl vibrating in my chest. It all replayed in my mind every time I closed my eyes. I sat on the couch of my small apartment, nursing a cup of coffee, staring out the window at the early morning fog that still hung over the city. The sun was up, but the streets below felt distant, as if the world had moved on and left me behind. A phone rang, jerking me from my thoughts. I glanced at the caller ID. It was my friend, Matt, from the firehouse. I hesitated for a second before answering. "Tang," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Chris, man, how you holding up? You good?" Matt's voice was loud and full of energy, a stark contrast to how I felt. Yeah, I'm good. Just trying to take it easy. You know?" I leaned back on the couch, rubbing at the side of my neck. The tension in my muscles had been building for days, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being on edge. "What's up? I heard the news. Shit, man, you got mauled by a bear? And Jesus, are you okay?" He was clearly concerned, but the shock in his voice didn't sit well with me. I knew everyone would be talking about it. Hell, the whole city was probably buzzing about it by now. But hearing Matt so shaken made it all feel real in a way it hadn't before. "I'm fine," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Just a few stitches, some bruises. Could have been worse. I was lucky." "Lucky? Dude, you got bit by a_grizzly_bear. That's not just lucky. That's insane. I mean, you should be in the hospital for like weeks." I muttered, letting out a dry laugh. "Trust me, I was." "Jesus. Well, we're all glad you're okay, man. You're a fucking miracle. So, listen, I was talking to the guys and we all thought maybe you could tell your story on the podcast. You know, the one about wilderness safety. You've got the experience, right? You were a firefighter before. This could be good for the community. A warning, or whatever." The suggestion hit me like a punch to the gut. Podcast, the idea of sharing what happened, of talking about it to a wider audience, made me want to shut down. I didn't want to relive it. I didn't want to go over it again and again for the sake of a public service announcement. But I knew how these things worked. People were curious. People wanted to hear stories like mine, even if they didn't understand what it felt like. It was the kind of thing people turned into legends, something to tell around campfires or at bars. "I don't know, Matt," I said slowly. "I'm not sure I'm ready to talk about it yet. It's still fresh. I'm still processing it all." "I get it. I do," Matt replied, his voice softening. "But maybe it'll help, talking about it, getting it out. You know how you are, always in your own head. This might be the thing that helps you get past it. We're just trying to help, man. You don't have to make any decisions now." There was a pause, and I could hear him rustling something in the background. Maybe a notepad or his work gear. "But if you decide to do it, we'll make sure it's all about spreading awareness. You know, giving people tips about what to do in the event of an attack. It's important. This stuff happens more than people realize, and they need to know how to be prepared." I thought about it for a long moment, rubbing my shoulder. Maybe it would help. Maybe putting the experience out into the world would help me make sense of it. But deep down, I knew there was more to it than just offering advice. What if talking about it only made it worse? What if I couldn't get the image of the bear's eyes out of my head? "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But no promises, man. I'm not sure I can do it." Matt was quiet for a second, then said, "I get it, bro. No pressure. Just wanted to throw it out there. You let me know, all right?" "Yeah, thanks, Matt." We hung up, and I sat there for a long time, the weight of his words pressing down on me. The idea of sharing my story felt like a betrayal to myself. But what if it was the only way to keep it from consuming me? The next day, I decided to go for a walk. It was the first time I'd left my apartment since I got back, and I needed to clear my head. I wasn't ready to go back to the park. Not yet, but maybe walking through the streets of Billings would be a step toward getting back to normal. As I walked past the small shops and restaurants, I could feel the stares. People who didn't know me, who didn't know what I'd been through, looking at me like I was a freak. I heard whispers, saw pointed fingers. I tried to ignore it, but it was hard. I knew the story had spread like wildfire. "Hey, Chris," someone called from behind me. I turned to see a woman I recognized from the local coffee shop. Her name was Sarah, and she was always friendly when I stopped by for my morning brew. "I heard what happened," she said, her voice a mix of concern and disbelief. "Are you okay? I mean, really, a grizzly? That's crazy." I nodded, forcing a small smile. "Yeah, I'm okay. Just a few stitches, a lot of bruises. I'm still alive, though." She shook her head, her eyes wide. "You're one lucky guy. But, I gotta admit, I'm kind of fascinated by the story. I've been telling everyone I know. A bear attack? That's insane." "Yeah," I said, my throat tight. "It is." She paused for a second, studying me. "You're not mad about people talking about it, are you? I mean, I get it if you want your privacy, but it's just a crazy thing to happen, you know?" "I'm fine," I lied. Just trying to keep my head down." "Well, if you ever want to talk about it, share your experience or whatever, you should. People will listen." I tried to smile again, but it felt stiff. "Maybe. I'm not sure." After a few more pleasantries, Sarah left, and I continued my walk, my mind racing. It was clear now, this wasn't going to stay small. The story was out, and sooner or later, people would expect more from me. They would want the details, the pictures, the interviews. The story had taken on a life of its own, and I was just along for the ride. I thought about what Matt had said earlier about the podcast. Maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. Maybe sharing the experience, putting it into words, would help me make sense of it. But I wasn't sure I could. I wasn't sure I was ready to face it, to relive that terror again. What if telling the story made it real in a way that I wasn't ready for? It wasn't just about the bear anymore. It was about me, and how I could ever return to normal after something so primal, so raw, had come so close to taking my life. As the days passed, I knew I would have to make a choice. Either I kept running from the story, or I faced it head-on. It had been a week since the bear attack, and the truth was starting to sink in. I was alive. I had survived. But everything felt different now. Like I was walking through a world that wasn't quite my own anymore. People treated me with a mix of awe and pity, which was something I wasn't used to. They looked at me like I was some kind of walking miracle, but they didn't understand the heaviness that settled deep in my chest every time I thought about what had happened. I had tried to keep busy. Work had been a good distraction. There were fires to fight, drills to run, people to help. But the firehouse couldn't shield me from the weight of what had happened. It was always there, like a shadow hanging over me. And then there was the podcast. Matt had kept pushing me to share my story. At first, I resisted. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to be known as the guy who got attacked by a bear. It was a freak thing, something that shouldn't have happened. I wasn't some hero or expert. I was just another guy who got unlucky. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe talking about it was the only way to make sense of it all. The podcast was part of a local safety awareness show that Matt and a few of the other guys at the firehouse had been running for years. They focused on everything from fire safety to wilderness preparedness, always emphasizing practical tips and stories to help the community stay safe. The way Matt saw it, my story could be a good way to bring attention to how dangerous it was to hike alone in certain parts of Yellowstone. and to educate people about bear encounters. I agreed to do the episode, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread in the pit of my stomach. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, how I was going to frame it. What if I didn't do the experience justice? What if my words didn't carry the weight of what happened? Or worse, what if I ended up making the whole thing sound trivial? Matt had set up the recording in the firehouse, which felt strangely fitting. It was a familiar place. The smell of burning wood and old gear, the hum of the radio, the distant clatter of fire trucks pulling in and out of the garage. All of it grounded me. I spent most of my adult life here, fighting fires, saving lives. This was where I felt most comfortable. Matt led me into the room with the recording equipment and gestured to the chair across from the microphone. "All right, man, you ready for this?" he asked, his voice light, but there was a trace of concern in his eyes. I swallowed, trying to steady my breathing. "Yeah, I think so. Just don't expect anything spectacular. I'm just a guy who got lucky." He gave me a sympathetic smile. "Don't worry about it. We're just here to share the story. You're gonna do fine." I sat down, adjusting the headset and microphone. The soundproofing in the room was so complete that I could barely hear the usual noise of the station outside. It was just me and Matt now, the microphone in front of me feeling like a spotlight. My throat went dry as I stared at it. I could hear the faint hum of the recording equipment starting to roll. I wasn't sure where to start or even how to begin. Matt hit the record button. "All right, Chris, just start from the beginning. Tell us what happened. We'll take it slow, no rush." I took a deep breath and leaned forward, the weight of the moment heavy on my shoulders. It was a Wednesday. I had the day off and I decided to go for a hike in Yellowstone. It's not a crazy idea, right? I've hiked there before. It's part of living in Montana. Everyone knows the risks, but you don't think much about it. It's just one of those things, you go, you enjoy the view, and you get out of there. I paused, rubbing my left shoulder absent-mindedly. The ache was still there, deep beneath the surface. But I was alone. That was the first mistake. I always hike alone, you know? I like the solitude. I like being out there in the wilderness. Just me and the trees and the water. Matt nodded into the mic, encouraging me to continue. But that day was different. I don't know why. It was early in the morning, and everything seemed fine. The river was flowing low, there weren't too many people on the trail, and it was pretty quiet. But I should have known better. You don't go into bear country alone. You just don't. I leaned back in the chair, trying to find the words. It was harder than I thought. I could still feel the bear's weight, the thud of its massive body crashing into mine, the suffocating pressure on my chest. The memory of it was too close, too real. I didn't hear it at first. I continued, my voice a little shaky. I mean, it wasn't like I saw it coming. You know how it is. You're hiking, you're looking at the view, you're lost in your thoughts. And then there it was, banged, bigger than any bear I'd ever seen. It was right there, maybe 10 feet away, and it wasn't like it was scared or trying to avoid me. It wanted something. I didn't know what. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I remember thinking, this is it. I'm dead. Matt's voice cut in, gentle. What happened next, Chris? What did you do? I tried to back up. I remember trying to stay calm, like I'd read in all the bear encounter articles. But this bear wasn't listening to any of that. It was too big, too fast. It knocked me down before I even had a chance to think. It happened in seconds. I didn't even have time to scream. It bit me right on my shoulder. I could feel its teeth sink into my flesh, and everything went black for a moment. I thought it was going to finish me off right there. I took a moment to collect myself. The sound of my own voice brought everything rushing back, but I pushed through it. And then, I continued, my voice steadier now. It just stopped. It backed off like it was done. I don't know why. Maybe it was full. Maybe it wasn't hungry anymore. But it just turned around and walked away, like it had better things to do. And I was left there, lying on the trail, bleeding. I don't even know how I got up, but I knew I had to get out of there. I thought if I stayed still, if I waited too long, it might come back. There was a long silence, and I could feel Matt's eyes on me, even though I wasn't looking at him. Did you see the bear again?" he asked softly. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. No, I didn't see it again. I was too focused on getting out of there. I stumbled, I bled, I almost collapsed a couple of times. I don't even remember how long it took, but I made it back to the trailhead. I don't know why. I should have been more scared, but all I could think about was getting away from that bear, and somehow, I did. "Jesus, Chris," Matt said, his voice tight. "That's insane. That's a survival story right there." I laughed, though it felt hollow. It doesn't feel like one. I don't feel like a survivor. I feel like a guy who got lucky. I don't know what happened. I don't know why the bear backed off. But the truth is, I don't think I'll ever understand it. Matt let the silence linger for a moment before he spoke again. "But you're here, and you're alive, and that's the important part. You made it, and now, maybe someone else will learn from it." I exhaled slowly, the tension in my chest easing just a little. Maybe he was right. Maybe telling the story wasn't about understanding it. Maybe it was about surviving it. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the mic, and spoke the words I never thought I'd say. If this story helps someone stay safe, if it keeps them from making the same mistakes I did, then maybe it was worth it. "Maybe," Matt said, his tone softening, "but you don't owe anyone an explanation. You're here. That's enough." And for the first time since it all happened, I felt like maybe I was beginning to understand. After recording the podcast, I felt lighter in a way. It was like I had finally said the words out loud, and in doing so, I had put the experience into a box that I could store somewhere far in the back of my mind. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Matt seemed pleased with how it went, saying the feedback from listeners had been positive, even enthusiastic. People were asking questions, and the awareness about bear safety had clearly gone up. But something inside me was still unsettled. The conversation about the bear attack didn't stop with the podcast, it kept going. A week after the episode aired, I found myself meeting up with my old friend from college, Ryan, at a local bar. Ryan had always been the type to follow the latest trends and had a knack for getting people talking. Over beers and small talk, the conversation eventually circled back to me. And as usual, Ryan was quick to dig deeper, always needing more details. "So, Chris," Ryan said, grinning from ear to ear as he leaned back in his chair, "you're telling me a grizzly bear attacked you? That's like something out of a movie. It sounds too insane to be real." I took a long drink from my beer, feeling my stomach tighten. "It's real. I don't know what to tell you, man. It happened. I got attacked, and I'm lucky to be alive." "Lucky, yeah?" he said with a knowing smirk. "But, come on. Did it really happen the way you said? I mean, really happen? You're saying the bear just attacked you, then just left ? No reason. No signs of it hanging around afterward," and paused, setting my bottle down. "That's exactly what happened. It knocked me down, bit me, then wandered off. It wasn't hungry or anything. It just left." Ryan raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. "I don't know, man. I've read a lot about grizzlies. They're territorial. They don't just back off without a reason. Did you do anything to scare it off? Or maybe, I don't know, you startled it or something?" "No," I said firmly, leaning in slightly. "I didn't do anything to provoke it. I didn't run, I didn't scream. I just froze when I saw it. It came at me, knocked me down, hit me, and then it just left. I don't know why." Ryan stared at me for a moment, as if trying to gauge whether I was lying or if I truly believed what I was saying. Then finally he shrugged. "All right, I'll take your word for it, but it just seems too meat, you know? Like something's missing. It's almost like a convenience story. I mean, who gets attacked by a bear, but only gets a couple of bites and then walks away? That's not how these things go down. There's usually more chaos." I felt a pang of frustration, the old nerves crawling up my spine, The last thing I wanted to do was convince people that what happened to me was real. But at the same time, I couldn't stand the implication that maybe I was making it up or embellishing details. The memories of the attack were still too raw, too vivid, for me to just let it slide. "Look, man," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I'm not making this up. I don't know why it happened the way it did. But that's what happened. I was out there and I almost died. If that's not chaos, I don't know what is." Ryan raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, don't get all defensive. Just hard to believe. Bears are unpredictable, and I've read stories where people barely make it out. There's always more to the story. Anyway, I'm just glad you're okay. Just be careful out there next time. You don't want a repeat performance. I didn't know how to respond to that. I had been careful. I had done everything right, but I still ended up in that bear's path. As the evening wore on, I felt the conversation drift further away from the bear and toward other topics. But that nagging feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't go away. The doubt in Ryan's voice, the way he questioned the attack as if it wasn't real. It stung more than I cared to admit, and I wasn't the only one hearing whispers. The next day, I was back at the firehouse, sitting with a few of the guys during a break-in between calls. We were talking about routine stuff, fire safety, maintenance checks, the usual, but it wasn't long before the conversation turned to my bear attack. "I heard about the grizzly, Chris," said Steve, one of the guys who'd been a firefighter longer than I had. He was sitting across from me, eyeing me with a mix of curiosity and concern. "And I gotta say, I'm a little surprised you're up and walking around already. I thought bear attacks were usually way worse. You get knocked out or something?" I shook my head. "No, I was conscious the whole time. I got hit, but I stayed aware. I didn't pass out. I thought it was the end, but I managed to crawl out of there before it came back. That's all there is to it." Steve leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. "It's just strange, you know? I mean, you hear about people getting attacked by bears, and it's always brutal. But you walked away with just a couple of bites? That doesn't add up." I felt a familiar surge of irritation, but I kept my voice steady. "I told you guys it was weird. It happened so fast. They came at me, bit me, and then left. I don't know why. But it's real." "Tan," Steve muttered, tapping his fingers on the table. "I'm just saying, you're lucky, man. I've been out in the woods plenty, and bears don't back off like that, especially grizzlies." The others around the table nodded in agreement. "Yeah, man," said Brian, another firefighter. "It just doesn't make sense. Bears don't let you off that easy. You sure it wasn't just a black bear? I've heard they'll back off if they feel threatened." I shook my head. "No, it was a grizzly. I know the difference. Trust me. But did you check for tracks? Any signs of it hanging around?" Steve asked. "No," I admitted. "I didn't have time to check. I was focused on getting out of there. I was too worried about getting back to the trailhead." Right?" Steve said, nodding, though his skeptical tone didn't fully fade. "I just think, if this had happened on a trail that wasn't so remote, someone would have found that bear. Maybe even taken it down by now. You know how they handle that shit in Yellowstone." I nodded stiffly, trying not to let my frustration show. "I don't know. I don't think anyone's found it." "Well," Steve said, standing up and stretching, "if you ask me, you're either the luckiest guy in Montana, or there's more to that story than you're telling us." I felt my heart tighten in my chest. This wasn't the first time I'd heard these kinds of insinuations. People were starting to question whether I had exaggerated, whether I had maybe misremembered parts of the encounter. The truth was, the doubt was starting to infect my own mind, too. I knew what I had experienced. I knew what I had felt. But the more people questioned the details, the more I started to wonder if they were right. Maybe I had missed something. Maybe I didn't see all the signs. Maybe there was something I couldn't remember clearly. Something that would explain why the bear left without finishing the job. I stood up abruptly, cutting off the conversation. "I've got to get back to work," I said, trying to sound casual, but the sharp edge of uncertainty was there in my voice. As I walked out of the break room, the words lingered in my head. _lucky. _misremembered. I wasn't sure if I was doubting the bear anymore, or if I was doubting myself. The following days felt like a blur, like I was walking through a fog. The physical pain from the bear attack had faded, but the mental scars lingered. It wasn't just the deep gash on my shoulder that haunted me. It was the relentless questions, the doubt creeping in every time I replayed the events in my mind. Why had the bear attacked? And why did it just walk away? It didn't make sense. The hospital visit was a haze of sterile lights, quick orders, and the sharp smell of antiseptic. Dr. Harris, the ER physician who treated me, had done a quick but thorough job of stitching me up, giving me painkillers, and sending me off with instructions for aftercare. I was lucky, he'd said. The bite was deep but not life-threatening. The claw marks, though they'd left a series of jagged grooves along my chest and back, were superficial. He'd done a tetanus shot, wrapped me in gauze, and scheduled follow-up appointments to make sure there was no infection. The weird part, though, came when I went back for the follow-up a few days later. Dr. Harris was a no-nonsense kind of guy, someone who didn't suffer fools. He checked over my wounds with the usual professional detachment, asking me if there had been any signs of infection and if I'd been following his instructions. I was starting to feel like just another patient, but then he did something that made my stomach lurch. He looked up from my chart, his brow furrowed, and sighed heavily. "Chris, I've been meaning to ask you something," he said, setting the chart aside. "I've heard some rumblings about your bear attack. People are saying there's some ambiguity surrounding it." I froze, my mind racing. I hadn't expected it to come up here, not in the sterile, detached setting of the clinic. But the way he phrased it, _ambiguity_, sent a chill down my spine. "Ambiguity," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you mean by that?" Dr. Harris leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as if he was trying to process something. "Well, there's a lot of speculation going around. You've been on the news, right? And now people are talking about this being more of a freak accident, or even a misidentification of the animal. You know how the public loves a good story, Chris. And some folks are, well, they're not buying it." I felt a lump form in my throat. "What are they saying?" He glanced at me, his expression softening slightly. "They're questioning the details, I guess. The idea that a grizzly just walked away from an attack without finishing the job doesn't sit right with some people. Some think you might have exaggerated it. Some think, I don't know, maybe it wasn't a grizzly at all. There's a lot of chatter about the whole thing. They're starting to wonder if you got confused." I blinked, the words hitting me like a punch in the gut. It wasn't the first time I had heard the doubts, but hearing them from someone like Dr. Harris made it feel more real, more terrifying. I swallowed hard. "So, you think I'm lying? You think I'm confused?" He shook his head, holding up a hand. "No, Chris, I'm not saying that. But it's clear there are a lot of inconsistencies in what you're reporting, and it's causing concern. People around here are questioning the story, and it's making it harder for others to take your experience seriously." I could feel the blood rushing to my face. "You're really going to sit here and tell me I'm lying? I told you exactly what happened." "I'm not saying you're lying," he said slowly, "but this kind of thing isn't typical. Bears don't attack like that. Grizzlies especially. They don't just let you go. Usually it's a mauling, not a tapping-do. And without evidence, like tracks or fur or even a report from a park ranger, it's difficult to back up what you're saying." I exhaled sharply, running my hand through my hair. "I don't have evidence. I don't have anything but scars and memories. But I know what happened, and I'm telling you the truth. It was a grizzly, and it attacked me." Dr. Harris studied me for a moment, the kind of look that made me feel like a suspect under a harsh interrogation light. "Chris, I'm just trying to make sure you're okay, mentally and physically. If something's bothering you, you should talk about it. And if there's a chance you've misunderstood what happened, or maybe you're just in shock, that's okay. We can work through it." It's better to acknowledge that now, rather than later. I wanted to shout at him. I wanted to tell him that he didn't understand. But I stayed quiet, trying to suppress the rising anger. Was he really suggesting I didn't remember? That I was confused? The bear's claws had been sharp. Its teeth had torn into my flesh, and the weight of its body had crushed me into the ground. How could I possibly forget something like that? I took a deep breath and stood up, pushing the chair back with more force than necessary. Thanks for the help, document, but I'm fine. I'm Athena. My voice was tight, and I couldn't look him in the eye. I just needed to get out of that room, away from his doubt. Dr. Harris didn't try to stop me. He just nodded and picked up his chart, his eyes unreadable. All right, Chris, but don't ignore it. If you need help, any kind of help, don't hesitate to reach out. I muttered something non-committal as I walked out, and the door shut behind me with a soft thud. But as I stepped into the bright hallway, the weight of the conversation followed me. The question lingered in my mind like an echo. Was I missing something? Sir. I wasn't sure what bothered me more, the doctor's skepticism or the realization that he might have a point. I didn't have physical evidence. I didn't have proof that the bear had attacked me and then just walked away. All I had were my scars and a memory that felt too distant, too surreal. I could still see it in my mind. Its dark fur, its massive claws, the way it had charged at me with terrifying speed. But I didn't have the proof, and that made everything feel fragile. Back at home that evening, I tried to shake off the unease. I had to believe what I knew, what I remembered. I had to keep pushing forward. But the nagging thought wouldn't leave. Was I just another guy with a wild story? Maybe I had gotten the details wrong. Maybe I had just been lucky. Maybe the bear hadn't even been a grizzly. The doubt crept back into my mind, soft at first, but it grew louder, pushing against my resolve. The next morning, I woke up to find a message from Matt, the host of the podcast. "Hey man," it read, "I've been getting some flack about your bear story. A few listeners reached out saying they don't believe it was a grizzly, and they think you might be overstating things. They want more details. You good with that?" I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. I didn't have the answer. All I had was the feeling that I was losing control of the narrative, that I was becoming the subject of speculation, not the survivor of an attack. Maybe Matt was right to ask for more details, but part of me just wanted to be left alone. But another part of me, the part that had survived, wanted to fight back. I had survived. That was the only truth that mattered. I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. Not even the people who doubted me. With a deep breath, I typed a reply. "Tell them I'm not backing down. I know what happened." Then I hit send. The next few weeks passed by in a haze. The conversations about the bear attack lingered in the background. Like a persistent hum I couldn't escape. No matter how hard I tried to move on, back to work, back to my routine, the doubts from people in my life, and the lingering uncertainty within myself never fully left. Matt had released a follow-up episode to the podcast where he gave me a chance to elaborate on my experience. The feedback was mixed. Some listeners thanked me for sharing my story, saying they appreciated my honesty, while others seemed more skeptical, questioning my memory or the details of the attack. There were even some who suggested that I had overreacted to what might have been just a defensive move from a stressed animal. Those comments stung the most. How could anyone say that? How could anyone diminish what had happened to me? I hadn't even realized how badly it was affecting me until one evening when I found myself staring at the scar on my shoulder in the bathroom mirror. The faint line of it reminding me of everything I had gone through. A raw, unfiltered panic gripped me. It wasn't the scar that scared me. It was what the scar represented. A truth no one seemed to want to believe. It was a permanent reminder of an attack that, for some reason, nobody could make sense of, including me. The thing is, I'd always prided myself on being grounded, being the guy people could count on when things went wrong, a firefighter, a protector. I'd seen destruction, danger, and death countless times. This felt different, felt like no one could understand. Even those closest to me seemed to either dismiss what happened or question my account. One afternoon, after a grueling shift at the firehouse, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was strained, which immediately made my stomach drop. "Chris, are you doing okay?" she asked, her tone more serious than I was used to. "I heard about what happened on the podcast. A lot of people in town are talking. They're not sure what to think." "I'm fine, Mom," I said, my voice more clipped than I intended. "I don't know why this is such a big deal. That happened. I'm Elise. End of story. But sweetie, it's just, people don't understand," she said softly. "They're confused. They think maybe it wasn't a bear. Maybe it was just some other animal. Something smaller." I closed my eyes, feeling the heat rise in my chest. Man. It was a grizzly. I know what I saw. I know what happened. Okay, she said quickly, as if trying to calm me down. "I'm not doubting you. I think it's harder for some people to accept, you know? It's just hard to believe." Her words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. Hard to believe. She wasn't the first to say that. And it wasn't just strangers. It was my own family, my friends, and even the people who should have believed me the most. The next morning, I decided to visit Yellowstone again. Not to hike, not to confront the place where everything had gone wrong, but because I needed to see it again. I needed to get closer to the memories that had been replaying in my head over and over. Maybe I could make sense of it. Maybe if I stood there again, in the place where it all happened, the answers would come to me. I drove for hours, the long road stretching before me, the familiar sight of the park entrance finally coming into view. The trees, the mountains, the vast open space. It all looked so peaceful, so normal, despite the chaos I had experienced here just a month ago. As I parked near the river where it all happened, I hesitated. My hands gripped the steering wheel, and I could feel my pulse quicken. It was early in the morning, before the crowds started to filter in. The park was quiet. The only sound, the distant rustling of the trees and the gurgle of the river. I stepped out of the truck, the cool air hitting my skin as I stood there, looking at the trailhead, the rocky bank where I had been knocked to the ground. I walked slowly toward the spot, each step taking me further back into the past. The memory of the bear's weight on me, the terror in its eyes, the stench of its fur. It all rushed back in flashes. I could see its massive claws and hear the growl vibrating in my chest. But there was no bear now, just silence. As I stood there, trying to center myself, I heard a rustling behind me. I turned quickly, my body going on high alert, expecting to see something, anything. But it was just a park ranger walking toward me, clipboard in hand, looking more curious than anything else. "'Kay there," the ranger said, giving me a polite nod. "You okay? We don't usually get many folks this far off the beaten path this time of day." I forced a smile, though my heart was racing. "Yeah, just needed to get out here again. Clear my head." He nodded knowingly, as though he'd heard this sort of thing before. "That's understandable. This place can be pretty overwhelming if you've had a close encounter. Just make sure you stay aware of your surroundings. We've had some grizzly sightings lately, though nothing too close to the main trails." I stiffened at the mention of grizzlies. "I know. I had an encounter here not too long ago. A grizzly attacked me." The ranger stopped in his tracks and gave me a measured look. "You sure about that? A grizzly? We've had reports of some unusual behavior from black bears, but it's rare for a grizzly to attack without cause. Usually they'll avoid people." I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, a familiar frustration bubbling up inside me. "I know what I saw. I know what happened. It was a grizzly. It attacked me, bit me, then just left. That's all there is to it." The ranger looked at me for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "Muck, I'm not here to tell you your story's wrong, but if you're thinking about reporting it, Or if you plan to share it with anyone, you should know. There's no official record of any grisly attacks in this area recently. Nothing that matches what you're describing. You might want to keep that in mind. The words hit me like a physical blow. No record. No evidence. No pros. I stared at the ranger for a moment, trying to find the right words. So, you're saying you don't believe me? No, he said slowly, his tone softening. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that without evidence, people are going to doubt. And sometimes, without concrete proof, stories fade. People forget. They move on. I didn't know what to say to that. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I had wanted answers, but now I wasn't even sure what I was looking for anymore. Maybe I had been chasing a ghost this whole time. An answer that didn't exist. I'll be fine, I said, finally breaking the silence. I just wanted to see it again, to know that it wasn't just some dream or some mistake I made, that I need to move on. The ranger gave me a sympathetic look. Take it easy out here, all right? And if you ever need help or want to talk, we're always around. I nodded, but it felt hollow. As the ranger walked away, I stood there for a moment longer, staring at the spot where the bear had attacked me. The place was peaceful, calm. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. There was no evidence, no proof of what happened, no way to show anyone the truth. All I had left were my memories, my scars, the echo of a bear's growl, still reverberating in my chest. And just like that, I realized something else. I didn't need anyone else to believe me. I had survived, and that was all that mattered.